Hi everyone, welcome to part 7 of my Disney Infinity War toy box series, which we are now looking at stage 3. This is the second clip on my Edinburgh level, which is the whole level is called the 310 to Edinburgh, which we've labelled this box. Now, after rejigging the beginning part of our opening scene, this is actually now the full mechanical gameplay layer, which you haven't seen before. So you'll see now that as we enter the train station, the trains now automatically are moving, whereas before it was done as a demo. So we come in here, and our object of the game is to get across the 3 platforms to rescue Vision. So we have to jump across these trains. Now you could say, well, why don't we just run across them? But if you should fall in between the tracks, you will die. So as you'll see, you'll see me jumping carefully across, but if I should drop the list, I'll die, and I'll take him back to the city centre, to my lovely part here, and then I have to run back in and do the whole flipping thing again. So it is where it gets a little bit tense, because if you're on stage 3 and you die, you do not want to come all the way back. So we have to be careful with our jumping. So you'll see here now jumping matter, we have to time it correctly. Some platforms are further apart. And now, previous clip we showed you how to build the foundation. So what we're focusing on this one, like I mentioned, is the actual trains themselves. How do we get the trains to move at different speeds, at different packs? How do we get them all together to be grouped together like this? So you'll see here, double across, and that train's a fast train. Woohoo! And as soon as we come through onto this platform, now enemies appear, and we're now going to be them. I think I picked the right type of baddies here. These are from the Force Awakening enemies. I thought they were quite good with their axes. They look quite good, I thought. Now, one thing I did think when I was playing this level through is maybe I needed the enemies together. Oh, that was a good little thing. Did you notice that that guy seemed to be vanished? And the reason why that guy vanished was there was way too much memory being used. And it just like, we've got too much memory here, I've got too many trains, and I use 8 characters, so I'm probably going to do the final, make it 7. So as I start killing them off, I thought it was quite good. I think 8's the most we could have done, otherwise we would have just given it a right headache. I need to master Captain, I haven't played around with him yet. Oops. Nice one. So have we killed them all? Oh, there's no more. Oh, he's gone. Take that. So we're going to kill these enemies. That's them all. Right, so then when we do this, we then got to go on to the next stage. So we now again don't want to die here, because if we die we're in trouble. So we've got to then work out the trains. You'll see we can jump a little bit. We're one on the top, but it's only when we fall through we got problems. So far so good. And our third clip is going to show you how we do the thing about dying, how we get the enemies to spawn, how we get the whole thing to trek. So we're just focusing on how we get these trains to work, which is quite good. Yeah, and that's the main essence of this part. And basically, the train bit is very quick and simple to do. Now you'll notice here, we talked about at the end of last clip the climate thing, and because I wanted to show you the colours, I thought, well, it does need to be twilight. So when we get to the final stage, I get the climate to change, to go that little bit darker. So Captain was here all along, as we now fight in the middle of the night. So I thought that was a quite good little touch. And I've got a couple of big enemies now, making it a little bit tough. So the enemies get a bit harder to beat now. They're not as straightforward. Get some help from Thor there. Thank you very much, Thor. That was quite good. And we'll do it again, please. Oh, that was quite cool. I forgot I had that one. Right. Yes, he was killed quite easily. So we've already got some bloke already died here already. Where's he gone? There he goes. Oh, didn't have a chance. Right, so we're now going to go on to the final stage, where we have the big showdown with our enemies. We go across now. All I've got to do is just don't die. We're almost there. Oh, nearly messed it up there. You've got to time your jump. Some trains are fast, so you don't want to miss it. If you go into the tunnel, you will die. That's so far so good. Oh, and you're back to the very beginning. Let's just say I did it a few times. You'll see in the third clip we'll do the full run through with the boss fight as well, but you'll see how many times I got killed. It's quite funny, but we'll leave that for the final one. But what we'll do here is we're just going to go through now and fight the trains. Now you can see what I was talking about, the blue thing when it's dark. All the trains are slightly blue tint. That's because I've changed the climate now to the night one. So I did prefer it being in that daylight tone. But this is how the gameplay now works, and it's now like the game of Leapfrog, which you've got to time just right. I can use that option again, quite like that. Right, well that's the game. Let's show us how we get the train working. Okay, we'll do the full run through in our third clip, and we'll use Black Widow. Okay, so we left it with our train being built. Now one thing I didn't show you here was just to point out that when we finished the last clip, we took this piece and we moved it up. Now that one I mentioned briefly, but we put that in the middle of the road. Okay, and like I mentioned in the previous clip, we had to get rid of all the buildings because these buildings gobbled up the memory. So you'll see here I put them next to the big villain. I always wanted to use the big town hall option, but these buildings just made it crash. Every time I tried to come back, it tried to reload it, going from design tool to this, it would crash and lose my work, and obviously swearing would occur, and it was really shocking. So I had to get rid of all those buildings and bin them all out, which actually makes it more directed with just running straight through the building. So actually in the long run I didn't realise it was quite good. Also I didn't show you that there was a land gap between these two when we set the first one up. So I've left these in just to show you that when we finish the building, that says every element not been missed, we need to make sure we have to put those soil bits in. So I just thought I'd show you that as well. So little areas that we may have missed in the first clip when we built the map. So you'll see here, if I just change that to the chopper's runway. I'll put that across, and then we'll just move that down and just fill the gap, because I've got underneath the steps, I've got to fill it in, and you can run underneath there. So I just need to fill that block in. So I didn't point that out in my last clip, so I just wanted to make sure I'd got everything covered, so you can't say I missed a section off there or anything like that. And I'm posting all these clips up at the same time, so it shouldn't be an issue. So there we go, in we go. That was the last line bit. There was a gap there that you couldn't see, and then I think I had a couple of little bricks either side on the end. Now as I fill that in, I'll just talk about the trains. The trains, each line wants to run at a different speed. Okay, and from test I found that the 100 was too slow, so it's got to be everything over 150 to 300, so have them varied between that range in your entire level. So I tried to mix them up so no track ever had the same speed, so when you saw it from a distance they were all moving slightly differently. And I'll show you how to get a big fast intercity one coming in as well. Right, so that's those bricks there we missed off on the screen. And we'll come back to, so we're now looking at the bottom section of the map. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go underneath now the actual map itself. So using our spark tool, in fact no we're not, I lie, we're not doing the top tool, we're going to do the path tool at the top. See, I got carried away there, I thought we were going to do that next. Right, so what we're going to do here, we're going to use the path tool, this is the trains that are going to run across. Yeah, so you'll see here I'm going to grab the path. Now obviously the train starts at certain sections, so I don't want to fit it flush in the middle, it wants to be in the middle of the end piece. So you'll see the track stops there at the end, so in the middle of that I'm going to click one on the point and just draw that line all the way up. So click onto there and then just drag that all the way up and draw the line. Now you'll see here, as you start drawing the line, look at that, you get that lovely yellow line to appear. As you go through in this level, and the more lines you put, these lines will disappear. It cannot cope plotting them all. So one thing I noticed that these lines don't appear after a while, so you have to look at the colour of your points. You'll see here the point is yellow. So when we confirm that, you'll move it across, you'll see it yellow. If I circle out, that's now done. It now goes back to a green. Okay, just keep an eye on that. Make sure the next one is yellow and drag that across. Now in the early stages you'll see the yellow lines, yeah, But as I say, as the more trains you add to it, those lines, it can't plot those as well, so it tends to just not show you anymore, which is really tricky. And I hadn't come across that before, so you have to be very organised on how you put your code in. But you'll see here, we're going to go back and forth, up and down these lines, putting the rail tracks on, and that's what the trains go. So one train goes one way, the other track comes back the other way, so they go alternate either way. I didn't do one at the same distance. I probably could to alternate it up, but I want it to be one or the other. So we're just going to go up and down every one of these. So I'm going to need the 27 paths for each track. So I've got to do this for every single track. Go across, so to the line point, get to the point, stop, get the same, great, hit your dot to put the dot in, move it across so you can see it's moved it, circle out, click the item again, hit the dot in, and keep going back and go up and down on every single one of your 21 tracks. Now obviously I'm not going to do that for you, so I'm going to speed this up, but that's what you need to do. Okay, so they are now, all those tracks have now been set up. And I did also mention in the previous clip, you could only just do 2 platforms, you didn't have to do 3 parts. Now that big chunky block we don't need, so I'm going to get rid of. And I'm going to get the train tool, wherever the train tool is, and I want the thinner one. I'm going to set this up. Okay, and I'm going to line this underneath the actual place, because obviously I'll just line it on the screen. So here's the map. So you'll see I'm lining it right to the very top. Move it across. So I think that is deep enough. So looking at the box here, if I go back into it, you'll see I can line them back up here. Alright, make sure I've got enough gap to put some trains in, and I want 6 of these hidden underneath the map because we're going to place all our trains on that particular part. So you'll see here we've done our 6 blocks all underneath the actual map, which is quite good. So now underneath here, what we can do here is we have to go back to our Toy Origins, and we're going to go to our Marvel takeover box. So Marvel Battlegrounds box, where you have to unlock the pieces. So these are the train pieces that we're going to do. So I'm just going to sit these all in here just to help speed them across. Now I think to unlock the train pieces you have to use different Marvel characters to use it. I'm not using the blank lid because if they do they'll die on the box, but there are different colours and we're going to use a combination of those. Now I'm going to use those as the engine, so they're going to be the engine and the train. So what we're going to do here is I'm just going to set up some links here. So this is the first set of trains, so I'm going to have 2 trains, then I'm probably going to have 1 train, or I could have 3, then I'll have 1 train, and then I could have 2. So I can do different sets on here. I'm going to add to those at the moment. I'll do a 4 at the moment. So these are our sets of trains that we're going to have. So we're going to have 3 different sets of trains for this particular example. So what we're going to need to do now is, I've got the trains lined up. We are now going to get our path tool out. Now, to do the trains and to make the trains look like they're connected, you have to join them in series. So in this case here, we're just going to do a little path tool here. So I'm just going to line them up. Right, but the question here, the path is you have to do the handshake. Now, if you've seen my Making City, I've done exactly the same thing with the cars. But the difference is, these paths here have to be 6. You see, I'm counting 6 across. Exactly 6, not 5, has to be 6. That is the exact length of the car, and if you do 6, then they will be perfectly joined together. So each of these path tools here that you'll do, you'll see along here, now I've got one set up, I'm just going to count them through, but they need to be 6, so you have to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. To be a length of 6, just to show they match. Okay, and by setting them off in a daisy chain, that will allow them to all get nicely staggered and joined up, so they look like they are connected when actually they're not. So we're cheating the system here. So every train starts on its own path, and then we're going to link them to one path, and then we're going to join them up to the paths that we've just been setting up above on the actual tracks themselves. Okay. Okay, so we've now got our track there, our train going across, our items. Yep. Now those trains, once they join, they're going to join another little path. So this is the thing. Now you could use a timer here, and I didn't use a timer on purpose. So what I do, I'm just going to set up in. I think I did another 6 again. It doesn't have to be any. It could be any size you wanted actually. But the reason why I use the path tool and not a timer is that I can adjust the widths of these, the length of these paths, to show the gap that I want to move the trains between each other. So you'll see here, that's the first path. That's where they're all going to connect to that train, and they're going to travel along that particular setting. Yeah, when they get to the end, they're going to go to the top. So the next train, when that finishes, it's going to set these trains off, which are all going to join the same path. So if I line this up here, right, if I join the line here, so if I click a path, all I need to know is the gap is the difference between these two paths. So if I look above, I now need to create this gap bigger. Okay, and if it's too short, then they can. So I want to say that's the gap I want between these two carriages. If I want it further, I can stretch that out. Now I'll show you this as an example, but how you can adjust this and tune this. But if you did a timer, you've got to work out the seconds and the clocks, and you get very calculated message. Here you can visually see that is the gap. That's the gap between these two trains, and that actually is way too short. But I've done that on purpose to show you this. Now, although this is quite handy, this is quite time consuming. So again, this one, I want the gap here to be bigger, so I'm going to stretch this one out, and I want that gap to be larger. These are the gaps between the trains, so I'm quite happy with that. That's quite good. And when you start off, like I mentioned, you can see the yellow lines, which is great. But as you start doing those, these lines won't show up, so you'll just have the dots, so be very careful. Right, so what we do is now we've got this set up here, that's what we're going to link those trains to. Yeah, so they're all going to follow through. So what we have to do now is we have to switch the first paths off on the screen. Yeah, we'll need to do that. But first of all, we're going to need a little logic gate to set this all up for us. This is going to be quite key. Okay, where's logic gate? There we go. So I'm just going to stick this here. This is going to start off all our train tracks. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to link that to options. So we're going to go through these particular paths, yeah, and that path tool there is going to affect a new logic connection on output. Can you turn this train on? Can you turn that track on? When you turn that on, it'll go train. The train will move along. When the train track gets to here, new logic connection. When point reached on path, yeah, can you connect that track to this particular one? So connect to trigger an actor to that part. At the same time, so the train will move on to there. At the same time, when you reach that point, new logic connection, when point reached on path, can you turn on that particular group? That next train will carry along. When it gets to this point, new logic connection, when point reached on path, yeah, what we're going to do is we're going to connect it to that track. So those two trains now will be connected end to end. Yeah. Once that train goes on, we're going to do new logic connection. When point reached on path, can we set the other train going off? So we go back here and daisy chain that. So that one logic gate is going to daisy chain all these items up, and you have to go through and connect that signal. So each track will have a double whammy at the end there. It's going to connect it to path, and it starts the next carriage off. And we go through that entire set, which is quite handy. So that will connect through here, and obviously I'm going to speed this up just so you see the connections go through, but that's what you need to do on this list. Right, so what we need to do now is we need to go to the properties of each of those paths, right? And it's only the starting paths, by the way. We don't have to do any others. You'll see here, I've gone to the properties, and we've got to switch these ones off. These are the only ones that we need to do. The rest you leave on, you don't change at all. So we'll go to here, go to properties, and we're going to switch them all off. That otherwise, if you hit the carriage to it, they'll start straight away. Okay, so we're going to go to properties, switch across, turn them all off. So they've all got to be turned off for every single one every carriage that you pick to choose. So properties, turn off. Now you'll see here I've left a speed of 100. We'll come back to that in a moment. But once they're now all switched off, okay, what we can do now is we now need to, obviously then we've got our trains all set up. Yeah, we can now connect those trains. So new logic connection, new path connection for each of those trains, not broken or collected. So sorry, new path connection, and you can now link it to that particular tool. So when you do that, the train will sit there waiting for the signal, which is from that logic gate, and you need to do that for every single one of those trains. So you have to now link them to that particular to their corresponding path. So once they're all set up, that logic gate is what triggers them all off. So as they go through, they'll connect to this path. And when they get to this end of this path here, we need to say here, right, new logic connection. When point reached on that path, can we now go and link that up to the main path above? So all these trains that we're doing are only going to be in lane 1. Okay, they don't go anywhere else, it's all lane 1. So I pick this option here and I do connect trigger an actor to path. Set that up, that's it. Now I have to do the same for each of the other options. So I've got to do the same for this option here. So I've got to link that one as well. So same thing applies with this path. New logic connection. When point reached on path, I need to connect that also to the corresponding actor, and I have to do the same for the third one as well. So they'll all move down the line. Now again, this is very much like exactly the same way as how to bring a city to life clip that I did last year. Except instead of doing it with cars, we're doing it with trains. But it works exactly the same way. And I've done the third one. So we are now ready to give this a test. So all I need to do to give this a test is put a signal into that logic gate there. If I put a signal into there, it will then fire this item up. So we get a little logic gate, which we've done. So let's get our button then. So I'm going to grab a button. I'm going to place this down. Right. So when I press this button on here, yeah. So I'm going to right click into here. New logic connection. Yeah. When pressed, can you input a signal in here? This will allow us to test this rule. Okay. Now, before you do your test, and I'm going to stress this to you extremely clearly, before you do a test, you must save it, because once you've hit that button, the tracks all move, and therefore you cannot use the save. All those trains will have to be reassigned back to that path. So do not do that. Okay. So this button is only after we've saved the level. So I'm just going to move this over here, just in a position. Okay, and we're going to use it as our test rule to test it out. But you must save it. I did it on one of my occasions, and then I had to reconfigure all the flipping trains. And that's the best way I can say it without swearing. So make sure you save it before doing the test. So we've saved it. We can now press that button. So that now sends all those trains running along the screen. And you'll see here, I'm waiting for the flood of trains coming through and they start to move down the screen. But you'll say this is way, way too slow. And just to point out, I did mention that the 100 is way too slow on the screen. We've got to be at least over 150. Yeah. The first train, though, is the one that goes by the side. So I wouldn't have that at full speed. But you can see there, like, flipping out, it's taking forever. Yeah, I'm running quicker than the train. The train needs to be running that little bit quicker than the person. And over 150 does do that. Also, look how flipping close they are. Those gaps that we thought were quite big, they're not that big at all. Look at them. It's tiny. Well, there's a gap there. Now that is the gap, but we need bigger gaps than that. We need the trains to separate on the screen. So we need to space those out on the screen. So we're not too happy with that. So let's reload the level back up. So we reload the level, which resets us the trains back to normal. So what we need to do here, and this is what I want to show you with the path tool, we want to extend the gap between the two. So if I click on the X button here, I can now move that pointer and I can drag that to my left and make the gap a lot larger between the two. Now the only downside is this one's not, so I'm going to do the same with this one. I'm going to extend this gap, but that now shows you the gap between the two, which looks better. So if I do the same with this one, click on this point and I can move it across. Okay, and I can pinpoint there. And that's set up, so I'm happy with that. That works there as well on the screen, so that's quite a good option. Yeah, so that now moves across. You can see their connection tools, so they all link there on the screen. And now I'm thinking 3 trains weren't enough on there, or if I need to move them faster. 150, that's not fast enough. So actually, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the properties of these, and I'm going to change this to 150. Now the downside with this, when you change the speed to 150 to make them speed quickly, you have to change all the paths that are connected to match that speed. So every single path that we have here and the one on the track have to all be set to 150. If you don't, then the carriages will crush together and will be halfway on each other. So all now have to be changed to 150. So you'll see here, I'm going to each individual one, and I've changed every single to 150 to make it a little bit faster. And like I said, we'll do a number of different trains on here, different stages, different speeds, just to show you how I've done it. But now I've changed them all 50, so all those ones are 150. I then have to go to track number 1, and I need to change track number 1 to 150 as well. Track number 2 is going to be a totally different speed, so don't worry about that later. But the track number 1 is also has to be set to 150, otherwise it causes a real mess up on your track. Okay, let's just that 150, then we can have a look at how that looks. So again, after saving it and then running it, you'll see the trains are now moving a lot more better. That's a better, look, that's a lot better, the track. Yeah, and that's not a bad gap between the two. I can't jump between the two. There's a good pause between them, so that's not too bad. I quite like that. And the other train's just far enough to see that it's coming, but again, I can't jump to it. The only downside is that after this final train comes, there's a long gap now till the next train. Because it's quite a long gap. So actually, I probably want a fourth train. So I'm actually going to stick a fourth train with a number of more carriages in there. So if I'm going to stick more trains in, you'll see here I've added 3 more path tools towards the end here. Yeah. And what I'm going to do is in point reached on path. Yeah, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on this one and I'm going to switch that one on. So again, repeat the same process again, go to the path, switch them all on and do that connection between them. So I've now added 4 trains on the group. Then I'm going to create a path on here, so we've got that first path there, which is the link. Now you'll notice I did say those yellow lines stopped disappearing, and look, you'll notice that yellow line has stopped. That dot is that very long one. There is no line for that third line, it's gone. That's where the line should appear. This is the fourth train one on the end here. So the lines do start dropping off, and I was amazed how quick they did, and that's because I was using those stupid buildings from Monsters Inc., which is really annoying, which is why the lines, it couldn't cope with it, so the lines started disappearing. So they do start going off, even though they appear to start with, be wary of those. And again, I'm going to have to change all those paths to 150, and I'm going to have to link them to the other route, and also connect the end of that path back up to the top path. And again, that should daisy chain give me the 4 trains going across on the screen. And we'll just speed this through just so we see how that works. Stay on the list. Okay, and so we do the last bit on the end. That's the new point we just done. Remember to make sure we add that back onto track number 1. Now you need to do this 20 more times on about 7 trains per track, which is why you might want to just do 2 sets of 7, not 3. So that's now our first set of trains. Yeah, that does our track 1. So track 2, we're going to prepare for this on top. Now also another little thing you'll see here, look at that connection. Yeah, I've done the speed. You'll see all the lines are connected as well. The more connections we have, those lines, those white lines that you see now are going to disappear because there's too many connections. So again, you're not going to see any of those. You're just going to have to make sure you plot these carefully. And like you see, that green line looks like a small track. It's not. It's the fact that you can't see that line. So they're going to start disappearing the more you start adding on here on the screen. So we now want to add another track 2. So on track 2 now, what we're going to do is we're going to plot out how we want the trains to appear. Okay, so what I do here is by the side of the trains, not on the actual tracks. I pick the train pieces which we have. Yeah, and we're going to plot the train pieces down what we're going to need. So we're going to look at here. Now I want different types of trains. So lining this up, so I'm just going to line this up. Yeah, and we know it's 6 boxes going across, so if we do it, you should see that that's the 6. And that is also important. The starting blocks must be 6, otherwise they won't join. And I'll show you a bit later in this clip when you don't join what it looks like. Okay, so I've got this train, so I now got to work out how many trains do I actually want. Yeah, what the trains on here. So every one of my trains starts with a carriage. Yeah, it's because that would be like an engine. And if I knew what type of carriage it was, I'd be able to tell you the engine number, but I've not got close. So that's what the engine is. So what I'm going to do now is probably mix this up with either a bit of cargo on. So probably 2 of them different sizes. And again, I'm trying to make them random. So some of them you'll see that I've got very long carriages. One I think I usually got 10. So I'm going to do, I can put a block here. And again, just playing them out so how I'm going to have the trains on the list so I can see what connections I want. I'm working out my different types of combinations. So I'm going to have 2 of those, and then I'll have one of the cylinder ones. And I'm just trying to think of the different types of size of trains we want. So longer trains I don't need as many as on the screen. So you'll see I'm doing 2 2s here. and I want them different lengths. So you're just going to have to work out what ones you want and play around with this in your own leisure on here. So now my carriage, though, that's that train, so it's 2 carriages and 2 boxes on the end. So if you look at that, then I then do another one, which is another 4. So and a 4, and then just a 2 train on the end. So I've got 2 trains on their own, then I've got 4, and then I've got a 5-piece train. So again, trying to mix the different lengths, but this time 3 trains, but still the same amount of trains between them. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to use my path tool again, so I need to go back to my path tool, and I'm going to set the tracks up for the second lot of train. So let's flick through it. So what I need to do here is line it up against each train, move it across. So line it up with that train. I now draw my lines per train in front of each one, exactly 6 boxes in line. And I do that for every single train that we have there on the screen. Okay, so you'll see there I've gone through and done it for every single track, which is good. Now what I know we can do here, now we've got this, the last one done. So we've got them all done, so every single train has those lines, which is good. So far we can still see, which is good. These trains are going to all appear on this particular track here, so we're going to line this up. So they're all going to connect to this train, so move it across. They're all going to connect to this train, so again, how many spots do I want? I want it to travel a little bit further, and again, I'm staggering it slightly. I don't want it to be the exact same length, because I want it to be slightly different, otherwise they all come out at the same time. But they are going to be running at different speeds though, so it doesn't really matter too much. So again, lining them all up. So you'll see I'm just keeping it in line. I want it for these group here. So I'm picking the middle, roughly the middle area. And again, this needs to be longer. But I've also got to take into account the other train is 5 carriages. So we can go a lot bigger. I want to go further than the other one. So we'll go about there. So in between those two, so you can see, again, I can plot the distance. They come out different times. And then just the 2 train, that can be longer again. You'll see that I adjust the one at the bottom there, made it a longer track. And by reloading it sometimes you'll find the lines do reload back in when you reload it back up, but as I say, the more we add on here the less you're going to do. So what we're going to do is going to set the speed of this one. So what's the speed of this track? Okay, so we've done 150, so this one wants to be a little bit faster, so we can pick it up. So we're going to say this, set this to 200. So each one of these paths now, every single one of these paths needs to be set to 200. So I'll just speed this up. And what you'll find here is now that we've set them to 200, these ones at the start of the one with the carriage, not only do we turn the properties off for those ones, but we have to change them to 200 now. So the other paths that they connect to will all be 200. These ones, the actual starting points, have to be turned off, and they have to be set to 200 as well. And if you miss one of those speeds, by the way, it will have a drastic knock-on effect, so be careful of that. So we'll go to one of those, change the paths for these 200, and the starting ones, switch them off. That's what we need to do. So what we can do also is now link that logic gate, so we can do a new connection on that logic gate, and we can turn on this particular path. So we can turn that one on. So same signal on output, turn that path. Now, what I found easier now is if I did this, you watch, the very top one was turn them on. So if you click the top option, you can turn it on. Go across to the end, new logic connection, which is the top one, when point reaches path, which is the top one, click on the top one, which is the top one, turn on. So it was quite easy to go through this like a zigzag and put all these settings on. So I quite easily flew all through those, going back and across, saying put new logic connection, when point reaches on path. I could click on it quite easily to get that connection done. Now when that's done, when we get to the end of this one, we do it the opposite now. New logic connection when point reaches on path, we have to take slightly longer. We have to now go back and say, right, connect trigger and actor to path. Yeah, and that will then link the item to there. We have to go back through here on that list. So new connection, connect trigger actor to path, and I did this one I did slightly different to the one below. I did all the switching on first, and then I'm doing all the linking to the paths, which I found was easier to track than doing it both at the same time, because I didn't know which one I'd done. So you know you're doing one job first, and then you're doing the second job. So you can choose what best suits for you. But now all I'm looking at is connecting the triggering actor to the path. Now we'll speed this one up as well. So they are now all connected. And you'll see all these have got 2 lines, which is great for you to test, but we can't do it. So now what we can do is when we've got our actor to the end, we can use logic connection. When we get to a new path, we are now going to go to track number 2, which is now at the opposite end. Now when we connect to the track 2, we must also set track 2 to also be 200. That is also vital. So in this case here, we're going to click into this option. If I can click into it, I can never use Spark, so sometimes I always get lost. But we'll set that in and we'll do trigger actor to path. Yeah. Now at the same time, I can get the property of that up and I can set that to 200, because then all these paths are now going the exact speed, which is all good. Okay, now all I've got to do now is the remaining 2 paths I need to link to it. So I need to go find the other 2 ends for the second track, and I now link it back to lane number 2. Right, so now we've got all those linked together. Now we have to add the carriages, so new path connection, link the carriages to the track. And if you switched all these off, they won't move, which will be perfect. So that is our second lane done, and we have to go through all these vehicles and connect them to the path. Which works quite straightforward. So new path to Toybox path, and just keep them linking together. Again, we'll just hurry along, but that's what you now need to do for all those particular trains. So now we've got the 2 tracks of trains done. We've all sorted. That's linked them across, so they're going to now appear on the screen. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do the intercity train. We're going to do the real super duper fast one. Okay, so these trains are going to go quite quickly. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 trains. I think 3. I think, or was it 2? I think in this one I just do them as 2. Yeah. Okay, so these are our fast little trains that come in on the screen, and they're linking them up. So there's only going to be 3 in this particular case. So I need my little path tool here. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go through every single train because there's loads to do, but I'm just going to show you 3 different sets. So I'm lining these all up and stacking these up. And we know that's exactly 6, so we can count it just to make sure. Now that's another thing. Look at that. The dot stayed green. It didn't work. After saving and loading back between, it didn't work. So when you get that occur, I have to delete it because the dot didn't change colour. It wasn't drawing the line. So by deleting the line out, go back down, line it back up. I click on the dot now. Yeah. Now when I drag it, I get the line now appears, and I also get a yellow dot. Now as time will go, that line will disappear, but the yellow will change. So if it doesn't go to yellow, you know that it hasn't worked. And every time I was loading and saving between the 2, it would not work the first time. So look out for that one. But I thought I'd leave that one in because it was a good item to show you that that was the case. So it doesn't always give you this on the screen, which always panic then, was it going to crash? But I did this for every single line. But we're going to now set all these trains up, all these lines for this particular train. So again, we'll just slightly speed this up. So now we've got the trains in, and this is an example here. I was going to show you a couple of examples where I got the timing wrong. So that there is where I've got 2 trains that started at different times, and they've merged together, so they're now in sync together. They've been merged, all messed up. So that was one error. Yeah. Okay, now the other thing I'm going to show you here is I've set the train for this speed of trains to be 300. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to now link this object to the train. So all the paths for these sets of trains have been set to 300. Okay, so all those trains there go at 300 speed. Okay, as you'll see, I've been adding these all up on the screen. Now, once you've added the train to the box, okay, I'm then going to go to the properties of the train, go to toy box setting, and I'm actually going to set that property. You'll see, hold on, you set to 300. The path is 300, but you can then set the properties of the actual object to also be a different speed. So if I go to properties, toy box path, you'll see it says 100. It's not the path, it's the object. If you set that to 300, that actually makes 600 on the speed. So you can set them to 600. If you wanted 400, you do the path at 200 and you do the object at 200, and there we go. If you leave the object at 100, it will just travel along the 300 line. So I've had to go in to change each of those objects to 300 and then change that with the object as well. And that gives you that super fast train. You see that super fast train going across? That's travelling at 600. You see it cutting through. But that's basically how I've set those trains up, and we're basically going to carry on doing that, doing those lines at a time. Each one of these trains, you're going to set them across and just keep doing each row as you go across, doing the same connections and repeating that process per line. So you're doing track 1, track 2, track 3, and you just each row will be a particular line. And depending on how number of trains you get to go and test and see and check, have I got a good enough space and gap, and you can come and test it, and by rearranging the lengths you can see how good you've got those slots. Right, that is all for this particular clip. That just shows you now you've got to go through and build those particular levels. I hope you found this to be of use. Let me know if you found these instructions clear. It'd be good to know. And we'll do the final clip, which is showing you how we make you die when you actually hit in the train set. So we'll look at the other trains that we will put together. I hope this has been of use, and we'll crack on. So thanks for watching, guys, and we'll get the other clip as soon as possible. Speak to you soon. Cheers.